This is a Dancing Stickman production. Trigger warning for this episode, I am going to be talking about the Epstein files. This latest tranche of 3 million documents that has been released, it is related to a project I'm working on currently, to projects I just completed. It's relevant to art and celebrity and the very premise of this podcast series, which is about how to make a living making art. What those documents makes clear to me is exactly why it is so difficult for the majority of us to make a living making art. We are being kept away from our natural ability to make art purposefully by the people who are in charge of this culture. And you have to make some real nasty bargains in order to be a successful artist in our society. So if you haven't looked into what the most powerful people in the world have been up to, I would say look into it if you can stomach it. It's important and it's crazy. But also, if you can't stomach it, I fully understand, because it is truly some of the most horrible shit. The title of this episode is Art is Magic. I don't mean that in a warm, fuzzy feeling kind of way. It's a description. I am absolutely witchy, a witch. I consider myself to be an urban art witch. But the way that I conceive of magic, yeah, I've been influenced by Wicca. I was like big into that when I was 14 years old. And I've studied other cultures' magical practices. And I've read stories about witches and magical women all over the world in order to get ready for Oops, All Witches. For myself, I am creating my own craft and tradition based on my own understanding of magic, because I do not want to appropriate from other cultures. That would be real settler colonial of me. And because I do not feel connected to my own Western European culture, I've been cut off from it for so long that it doesn't really mean anything to me. And not only that, but my family lineage, the colonizer in my family goes so far back that we colonized northern England with William the Conqueror. So I don't feel a need to draw on the craft of my ancestors. I would rather locate it within myself where I am here and now. The way that I understand magic is to be energetic manipulation to serve a purpose. And I don't think anything does that better than art. I think art is one of the most perfected crafts of energetic manipulation. I'm going to give you 2 examples of art as magic and the way that it focuses energy and attention on something particular in order to achieve a goal. So starting with this. What you are hearing right now is the sound bed under the opening of Oops, All Witches. And on top of it, I read a poem from St. Catherine of Siena. What you're hearing is not just an ocean soundscape, you're also hearing brown noise. Brown noise is static at a lower frequency. I've used it to help me sleep. It's very relaxing. It opens you up. And that was the point. I wanted people to be open and receptive to the story. So I put it under the sound of ocean waves, which it blends with very nicely. Then there's the bell. Obviously, a bell is metal reverberating at a specific frequency and tone. There's a ceremonial aspect to it, like we are beginning the story. We are in the magic circle right now. But then there's also the historical and cultural significance of bells. You can think of church bells, alarm bells. What bells do is they both call people in and they also clear space out. So along with the poem, which is what tells you what this series is about, I was creating a space to let you know that a ritual was starting and asking you to be open to it and receptive to it. And letting you know that the tone of it was to be in tune with nature, our nature. That's why also in the series, when I was sound designing things about the church, I would add different kinds of electrical sounds underneath it just to make it sound a little bit less natural, to let you know that what we had here was The church using what is natural to people, magic, in a way that they have manipulated into something else, something that's not quite nature. You wouldn't know this without me explaining to you. You'd have just heard it, and it would have signified things to you as you listen. But that is very deliberate energy manipulation on my end to ask you to be open and receptive to this story. That's why I consider it to be magic. It's energy work. Hey y'all, this is Sarah jumping in to interrupt myself 2 days before this publishes, but I just wanted to let you know at the top of the episode that I am publishing a bonus episode. It's only 4 minutes long. It's an original poem called Face-Eating Leopards, and let's call it another little spell. Call it a protection spell, call it a hex, call it a warning, call it what you will. It reflects my feelings about current events. It's only 4 minutes long. I'd appreciate it if you listened and shared it. Okay, that's the end of the interruption. Thank you. The second example that I want to talk about is Beyoncé's self-titled album. If you don't remember, in 2013, she released the self-titled album, Beyoncé, overnight. No one knew she was working on new music. And when she released it, it had music videos for every song. So it was a film in addition to an album that was released on an audience that had no idea that she was going to be dropping new music. Additionally, that was the first album she produced on Parkwood Records, which was the label she formed when she separated from her dad. So when she announced herself as a solo and independent artist, she did it without warning anyone. And in addition to providing a brand new album and new music, she also put visuals alongside of it so that the visuals of the album were indelibly imprinted along with the song. Most people saw the music in addition to hearing it when she made her first impression. This was what cemented me as a fan of hers. It was masterful marketing. It was not just the combination of the music, which is good, plus the visuals, which are also good, but problematic when you consider that Terry Richardson was the director of one of the videos. It was such deliberate craft, and she knew exactly what she was doing. She tells us that she knows exactly what she did in the song Feelin' Myself with Nicki Minaj. She says, "Male or female don't make no difference. I stopped the world." And that's exactly what happened. Everybody was talking about that, whether it was online or in person. Even if you didn't want to talk about it, you probably heard about it. It did what it was supposed to, right? It turned me from somebody who knew her casually and enjoyed her music into somebody who considered myself a fan. And she continued to surpass herself with subsequent albums. She's a very powerful practitioner of her craft. I have often thought of her as something like a high priestess, and boy, she does lean into that imagery. And that's important. The visual symbolism that she uses is really important to what she's doing, because she's not only a musician. The fact of her ability to dance as well, and the level of talent that she works with in terms of crafting her image is all very powerful. But last night, I took my vinyl Homecoming, Lemonade, and Renaissance albums. I took the poster I have and the rolling tray, and I put them in the garbage because Jay-Z's in the Epstein files. And after that tranche was released, he went out of the country. They're both missing. They didn't go to the Grammys. Some of the most disturbing things in this document release is the understanding that what this cabal, and I think that's the right word to use for these people, what this cabal was doing was performing their own kind of energetic manipulation and magic. They were sacrificing children. Whether we're referring to the actual deaths, murders of children, or whether we're referring to just the pedophilia, just the sex trafficking ring, that is the sacrifice of children as well. They were doing it because it's the worst thing you could do. a species that eats its young. When we have the choice to not be like that, we don't have to be like this. Most of us know that. Most of us are horrified. We don't have to be like this, but they choose to, because what they did to these kids, what it does is it forces their circle and binds it in secrecy and creates leverage and blackmail and loyalty to each other. If you want to be at a certain level of power in this world, you are going to participate in these rituals. And yeah, there's this stuff about these being actual, like, ritualistic ceremonies that they performed in addition to just all the other stuff. And that's whatever. I definitely have been listening to the occultists, and I agree with what they say about a lot of these gods, including the Christian god being an egregore. In fact, I made a whole podcast about it. But it's what they're doing with each other and then to us that matters to me more than whatever deific name they want to put on it. I think it's important that we not describe what they've been doing as satanic, because that's just reinforcing Christianity. These are ostensible Christians. And I want to point something out about the Christian God, which is that he raped a 13-year-old and then sacrificed the child. They're not doing satanic rituals. They're doing Christian rituals. It's interesting now to go back and hear all of these celebrities who have survived because they've been written off as crazy, to hear the things that they've been saying. They've been trying to tell us what these people have been doing. The people who make it to the top, they're the ones who are willing to keep it going, to keep the secret. And there's a very specific reason why the elite cabal that is behind everything, government, tech, art, science, education, sports, there's a reason why they initiate celebrities in and raise their status. And it's because of the magic of art. What these celebrities do is use their craft, a craft which we're all gifted with. Everybody is capable of making art. They use their craft in service of these men and what these men do. The exchange that they make is for wealth and fame and power, because what they're granted is the ability to broadcast their art widely, globally. If art is energetic manipulation, it's serving a pretty specific purpose. It's to focus us on them. That's the fame. It's to expose us just a little bit to what is actually going on behind the scenes. I would use, for example, the Rock Nation symbol. Jay-Z's Rock Nation symbol is the same as the symbol for the Illuminati. It's a hand gesture. You see in their videos, you see in the films, you hear in the music that they're telling us just a little bit about what's going on. And the reason why they only just tell us a little bit is to numb us to it. We get just little drops of exposure that let us know that something horrifying is going on just out of our sight. And that allows it to be fantastical because it's coming through art. It's poetic, it's symbolic, and it allows us to, because it's being normalized, dismiss it as like a conspiracy theory. And the other purpose of celebrity is to distract us, keep us focused on them, so we're not paying attention to the man behind the curtain. That is what celebrity culture is built for. I've seen a few people refer to celebrities as the court jesters, the ones who test the waters, confuse the enemy, see what the public will and will not accept. They're also the court wizards. They are the magicians employed in the king's service. I was exposed to the conspiracy theories around the music and entertainment industry way before this, like in my early 20s. I don't remember the name of the website that I was reading, but it was somebody who covered things like the Illuminati symbolism used in Jay-Z's brand and the sort of satanic symbolism, the satanic and demonic symbolism being used all over. Beyonce, Gaga, it's all there. And for me at the time, it was fun, but it was outlandish, right? So I put it aside. Little fun fact in the back of my mind that I used for flavor in my own projects. There's a reason why Tyos is called the all-seeing eye. But realizing that, oh, no, these people actually did have ritual space and practices, and that they were doing it in a ritualistic sense, sacrificing children. It made me realize that, oh, okay, yeah, the tinfoil hat people have been right the whole time. The biggest difference being that our QAnon and Pizzagate friends were just playing team sports, and they don't actually care if it implicates their team. They'll put those people in power. Realizing that, oh, this stuff that I was treating as sort of a thought exercise back in my 20s, it's actually real. They're doing this on purpose. They're showing us just a little bit to numb us to it. But they've been doing all of the most horrible things that we can possibly imagine people to be doing. It made me realize that the art that I have made, since I have decided to actually make my art and publish it, has been prophetic. Oops All Witches, we recorded it in 2024, July 2024, so before Trump was reelected. It's a story about an oppressive, patriarchal, genocidal religion that colonizes a land and disconnects its people from their natural and inherent magic and focuses everybody on them as the only arbiters of magic by genociding witches and trafficking children to power the magic that they do. That is the story of Oops All Witches. That's what's going on in the background. Now, the reason why I wanted to play the game the way that I did was because in addition to me being able to see what is going on in our world and turn it into an adventure, was because the solution is in there as well. What we need to do to beat them back is in there as well. And the only reason I say it's prophetic is because obviously it lines up one-to-one with what's actually happening. I made a fictional story that just overlays onto our real world, but it's prophetic because I listen to Black and Indigenous women. They are the lore keepers who know what the fuck is going on, who we need to be heeding when we try to figure out what to do about this. And I was actually quite explicit with everybody I worked with in Broken Sky. I said, hey, what we're doing here is we are opening a portal to a better timeline and we're going to all go together. And the whole point of it, of Broken Sky, was to get people together. The audience on Blue Sky that pays attention to the indie TTRPG scene, it was to get us all together, making magic together. Truly, the game mechanics of Broken Sky were make art. That was the true craft mechanic. Tell stories, the guidance mechanic. And play games together. That was the ceremony mechanic. Now, Broken Sky didn't penetrate very far. And I have already expressed some thoughts on why that happened, but I was looking at that from a business perspective. If I look at it from an esoteric perspective, I feel pretty firmly that that magic was blocked by the people who are always blocking our magic. One thing that I have realized about tabletop role-playing games is that they are a very powerful form of magic because what they do is get groups of us together, imagining different worlds and bringing them out into ours by telling stories. And the reason why I know it's powerful is because it's gatekept by the same class of people who gatekeep celebrity culture. The TTRPG space is gatekept by white men or white AMAB people. That's the reason why I never played as a kid. I wasn't part of the class of people who get to play those games as a kid. It's why I've had to elbow my way in as an adult. It's why it's been a struggle for women and people of color to be in spaces where these games are played. White men and white AMAB people keep it for themselves. And I was gatekept during the course of that game, pretty explicitly. I'm having a really hard time right now while I'm sitting here in front of my microphone, working up the nerve to say what it occurs to me to say. But I'll be real with you, if I am looking at things from an esoteric perspective, that feels like a hex on me. It feels like the hex that's on all of us, on women and kids and survivors, the one that tells us that what we say isn't important and that we should keep our mouths shut. That's a message I've been getting as a woman for my whole fucking life. And when I say as a woman, what I mean is someone who is socialized to believe that I am a woman. I do not mean anything about me, but I mean the role I was placed in. I said in the Broken Sky postmortem that someone told me I shouldn't refer to it as the TTRPG community. That was Jacob. That was my creative partner in the game. I used that phrase in a meeting with Jay Dragon, and Maisie, and Jacob made sure to correct me on Jay's behalf. That we don't use that phrase. We're careful about using that phrase. When I asked Jacob for clarification, why don't we say TTRPG community, what they told me is it's because people use that phrase to try and get close to the celebrities in the space. I told them right then they were gatekeeping. And they said, no, I'm not. I'm just trying to let you know what things are like in this space. Words are symbols. They're indicators of a thing that exists out in the world. They are not the thing itself. So it's significant to me that in a meeting where 3 of the 4 people there were people who are part of the class that was allowed to have TTRPGs as a pastime, as a hobby from childhood onwards, where I was the only odd one out, that I was the one being told that it's not a community. That's significant to me because it's communal storytelling. And the fact that I was told that it's not a community because we're protecting the celebrities in the space. Now, let's be real about the celebrities in the TTRPG space. They are not on the same level as real celebrities. But if you consider the tabletop role-playing game actual play space more broadly, the first 3 actual plays that I think of are all helmed by white men. You got Critical Role, Dimension 20, and The Adventure Zone. There is nothing helmed by women or people of color that is anywhere near that size. People don't pay attention to those as much. So protecting celebrity culture, even in this space that is a niche of the games industry, is reinforcement of the exact same structures that prop up the larger culture. And I'm just using my personal experience because it's the easiest example for me to reach for. It's one that I have. I know that I am not the only person who enjoys this pastime, this recreation, this form of art, who has been kept out of it because we're not part of the club. When I am online and when I'm absorbing information about the files, the common question that keeps coming up for the people who have actually dove into these files and read them is, why aren't we angry enough? Why aren't we doing anything about it? And I'm going to be real with you. The reason we're not doing anything about the most powerful people abusing the most vulnerable in this way is because we don't do anything about it in our real lives. We don't do anything about the smaller versions of this. I'm currently working on a short film that's about exactly this. It's called Expectations. It's about the time my ex-husband raped me. And it's about the little rapes. The ones that aren't as bad as the ones that I'm reading about right now, that men just get away with. Jacob is the person who reminded me that I'm sitting on the short script and that I ought to make it because it's relevant. I want to be very explicitly clear that the only capacity that Jacob and I were working in was a semi-friendly creative collaboration. That's it. They still reminded me that I had this script because the 5 months of us working together were 5 months of dealing with the sugar-free version of what I've dealt with from men for my whole life. They needed me to shrink myself to make them more comfortable, but they also needed me to fully accommodate them. Multiple times they made it clear that they and their inclinations were what were going to determine the nature of how we work together, of our relationship. And I didn't have any say in that. It got pushed far enough that at a certain point it became triggering. And they spent 5 months trying to get me to quiet myself. They made it clear that they had a problem with how I express myself. That's why I feel like it didn't go very far, because I was working with somebody who wasn't there to help. I had to actually ask them at one point why they were there. And what they told me was, A, they wanted to get the publicity for their podcast, which totally makes sense. That's what the whole thing was for. But B, then for the opportunity to potentially work with the celebrities who could be brought in to the project. Now, we'd already gotten Jay and Maisie on board at that point. The request had gone out to the team at Worlds Beyond Number to see if they wanted to come in. And that's who I believe Jacob was referring to. That's what they were there for. And that didn't happen. Then they just sort of kept fucking off. We had words when the project was over. I was very honest about how I felt about the way that they showed up, as well as some other things. They refused to be accountable. I invited them onto this podcast to do a postmortem and work it out. We'd had plenty of private discussions at that point, and I thought it might be worthwhile to put an example out in the world of someone who is socialized as a woman and someone who is socialized as a man working their shit out as an example for people to use publicly, but they refused. They wouldn't do it publicly, and they wouldn't do it without a mediator. Because my anger made them feel unsafe. I don't know. I can't make them be accountable. I can just say that this is the experience that I had with them. If they won't be accountable for something like this, something small, like we did a project together and they fucked up pretty bad, they sabotaged it. If they won't be accountable for something like that and the role that they played in the outcome that we got and the way that it affected me personally, how are we ever gonna get any men to be accountable for something bigger? We don't hold rapists accountable. Most people who come forward and talk about having been raped are dismissed, invalidated, ignored by both the people around them as well as the law. We'll never hold the people at the top accountable. There's nothing externally holding men accountable. Nothing. And they don't hold themselves accountable internally. Because they're cowards, ultimately, even the good ones. I'm going to flip it back to an esoteric perspective. Jacob, while not being a man, is part of the class that has set up the rules of this world for their benefit. And they were only participating because of their interest in being a part of and protecting the celebrity culture in the tabletop role-playing game space, which is a reflection of our broader celebrity culture, a difference in degree, but not kind. However, when it came to collaboration and the communal aspect of the magic of this game, they weren't there for that. They both explicitly and implicitly denied it through their words and actions. Like I said, the purpose of the game was to make art, tell stories, play games together, to open a portal to a better timeline and bring everyone with. And through the way that Jacob engaged with that game, they said no. But they didn't say no by saying no when I invited them in the first place. They said no by disengaging once we had brought everybody else on board. It is hard for me to see that as anything other than a hex or counter magic from an esoteric perspective. The point of this is not to dog on Jacob, although I frankly don't care if that is the effect. But it's that I know I'm not the only person who is socialized as a woman or survivor who has felt like we can't talk about anything that we go through because it could always be worse. That, I think, is part of the point and of the strategic and ritualistic nature of the release of the Epstein files, whether you want to call it magic or a psyop. Because, look, hey, if it can be that bad and we just let them get away with it, then what's even the point of raising anything smaller? I want people to realize that the enforcers that allow this larger culture, these more powerful people, to get away with what they're doing, they're among us. They're embedded with us. The reason why this has been bothering me, 6 months after the game concluded, still bothering me is because of the way that Jacob used their daughter throughout the course of our collaboration. And again, to be clear, I'm not saying that they have done anything at the scale of what we are hearing about in the Epstein files, but it's still the exploitation of a girl child. So a difference in degree and not kind. The first time we ever spoke with each other via a Google Meet, they had her in their lap for the course of the whole meeting. Like the impression you got of Beyoncé's self-titled album was indelibly tied to visuals as well as music, the first impression I got of Jacob was indelibly tied to their daughter. And they were late, and she was the excuse. They said that there'd been an incident at school, and that's why she was there. And I said, hey, if there's something that you need to deal with her, I am happy to reschedule this meeting. But they said no and continued to have a hour and a half long meeting with me with her in their lap. And so, of course, I acknowledged her and said hello, asked her to show me her favorite dice. And so whether you want to say that they were virtue signaling or being manipulative or binding me through her, the point was that it was the exploitation of her to make an impression of them. And that was not the only time that they've done something like that with her. And they've done it to her at a much younger age. So, like they reminded me, if lightly, that I was sitting on a completed script about my rape, the Epstein files have reminded me of them and their fascination with celebrity culture also reminds me of what I'm seeing in the Epstein files. And just knowing that we won't even look at that because it could always be worse. We're not looking to our left and right to see who's doing it right next to us. We're looking up. But it's in the whole culture. My hope with Jacob is that their sensitive guy artist thing isn't just an act and that they actually want to be a good person. But in order for them to do that, they'd have to face ego death, come to terms with how their shadow has been running them. And so even the ones who you think might be good, they slip into defending the exact same systems. And that's how they get upheld. They practice their own craft in ways to manipulate and make themselves more famous, more powerful, closer to the celebrity culture they want to be a part of, and don't consider how it affects the people around them. I've been absorbing a lot of information about the Epstein files, mostly in the form of the discussions that people are having around it, all the different perspectives, including everything from psychological to social to esoteric. And consistently across those, what I'm seeing is a call for a return to matriarchy and the identification of men as submissive, of men as followers. And I gotta say, I agree. I think that's true. I think if you look at broader society, if you look at men, the people who are socialized to believe that they are men, as a group, what you see are people who will absolutely follow the crowd, follow a leader. And I think some men have realized that that is powerful. That's something that they can harness to their own ends. So when you have a society that's run by manipulative psychopaths, what you get are men who could be better, exhibiting manipulative, exploitative, narcissistic traits as well. Men have to want to deprogram themselves. Men have to want self-sovereignty, not the kind of sovereignty that allows them to control others. And I don't see it. If I have a hex on my voice, hopefully saying something on my podcast that I've been building for the last 2 years will release it. And so I wanted to put it into the context of the way that art is energetic manipulation and the way that it permeates our culture from top to bottom. We need to look at ourselves. That's the only way to propel us to changing our society, because we're at the bottom. We cannot just reach up to the top and pull the whole thing down. And we know that there's no one above us who's coming to our rescue. So the first place we have to look is around us, and we have to clean house. We owe it to our kids. We owe it to all the kids. We owe it to ourselves. As things are, nothing will change because nothing compels the people who benefit from the system as it stands to change themselves. So we got to figure out what we can do without them. We got to leave them behind. Let's all get into this better timeline, and the people who want things to stay the way they are, leave them.